There's a place in Oregon the locals don't talk about. Not after dark. Not even when the wind howls just right and the scent of pine and earth drifts through the windows. They call it Hollow Pines, a stretch of old-growth forest at the edge of forgotten maps. On cloudy days, the trees seem to swallow the sky. At night, the forest breathes with the hush of 1,000 voices. We came here for escape. A weekend away, a rented house deep in the woods, a chance to forget our own troubles in the green silence. But from the first moment, something felt wrong beneath the surface. The air was too thick, the shadows too deep, and the pines themselves seemed to lean together, whispering secrets older than the town itself. They say if you listen long enough, you'll hear your name spoken by the wind. They say the forest remembers every step you take. We thought we were just visitors, outsiders with nothing to fear but a little rain and the cold. But Hollow Pines does not let anyone go unchanged. And when the whispering begins, you learn the forest is always listening, always waiting for someone new to remember. I'm not sure exactly when the stories about Hollow Pines first began, or how many of them were really true. In the town where I grew up, Haddonfield, Oregon, the forest was just a fact of life. It loomed at the end of every road, the dark treetops blotting out the horizon, as much a part of the landscape as the crumbling railroad bridge or the old diner with the flickering neon sign. It was something you accepted, the way you accepted the endless rain or the distant hum of the mill. And, like the rain, it got into everything. Into your bones, into your dreams. People talked about Hollow Pines in the same voice they used for family secrets. Soft, careful, half-joking, but never quite making eye contact. There were stories of children vanishing in the fog, of deer with too many eyes, of shadows that move when you're not looking. My mother used to say the forest was older than sin. My father never talked about it at all. I left Haddonfield the moment I was old enough, certain I would never return. I told myself I didn't believe the stories, that I was above all that backwoods nonsense. But when my childhood friend Owen called me after almost a decade of silence, his voice trembling as he whispered, they found something in the woods, something old. I found myself booking a ticket back home before I could change my mind. The plan was simple. Spend the weekend with the old group, Owen, Jamie, Kayla, and Marcus. Catch up, maybe take a hike through the edge of the woods for old time's sake. Owen had promised it would be quick, nothing serious. Just enough to satisfy his curiosity and prove to myself that the past is dead. He sounded different, older somehow, hollowed out. I arrived on a Thursday night, the air thick with the scent of rain and cedar. Haddonfield hadn't changed much. The main street was lined with the same sleepy storefronts. The only real difference was how empty everything felt, like someone had turned down the volume on the world. Owen met me outside the diner, wrapped in a faded army jacket, looking both thinner and more anxious than I remembered. He barely smiled when he saw me, just motioned for me to follow. Jamie and Kayla were waiting in Kayla's car, windows fogged from the inside. Music playing so low, it was more vibration than sound. Marcus would meet us in the morning, Owen said. He'd been busy, which, knowing Marcus, probably meant hungover or in trouble. We drove through town in silence, winding our way toward Owen's place near the forest's edge. The trees pressed in on either side of the road, their branches clattering in the wind. Every so often, a patch of fog curled across the asphalt, making the headlights flare white and ghostly. Owen finally broke the silence as we pulled into his driveway. I know this sounds crazy, but you ever feel like the woods are watching you? Kayla scoffed, but Jamie said nothing, just kept staring out the window, fingers tapping restlessly on her knee. That night, as rain rattled against the roof, Owen showed me what he'd found. A bundle of old photographs, warped and yellowed, each one showing the same thing. A rough circle of standing stones deep in the forest, surrounded by shapes that might have been people or might have been shadows. On the back of one photo, a single sentence scrawled in red ink. The roots remember. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those stones, those shapes. I heard the wind in the pines, whispering something I couldn't quite understand. By morning, the sky was iron gray and the world felt heavy, as if holding its breath. Marcus arrived late, eyes bloodshot, carrying a thermos of black coffee and the stink of cigarettes. He barely acknowledged anyone, just nodded toward Owen and said, "So, we doing this or what?" We set out a little after sunrise, hiking packs slung over our shoulders, boots crunching through the damp underbrush. The edge of hollow pines was less than a mile from Owen's back porch, but it felt like crossing into another country. The light changed, grew green, and filtered. The silence deepened. Our laughter faded as the woods swallowed the sound. I fell into step beside Jamie, who hadn't said a word since we left the house. "Hey, you okay?" I asked, voice low. She nodded, eyes fixed ahead. "Just feels weird to be back here. Like the trees remember you." I shivered, though the air wasn't cold. We found the old deer path Owen had described, marked by a tangle of thorn bushes and a fallen sign that read, barely legible, "No trespassing, danger." We pressed on, branches scratching at our arms, the world behind us fading into something unreal. The further we went, the more the forest seemed to change. The trees grew taller, trunks twisted, their bark split, and bleeding amber sap that glistened in the gloom. The ground grew soft, spongy underfoot, littered with patches of white fungus and bones. Animal, I hoped. After nearly 2 hours of weaving through the thickest part of the forest, Owen stopped abruptly. "There," he whispered, pointing ahead. Through the trees, we saw it. A clearing, the ground scoured clean, and at its center a perfect ring of standing stones, each one black with lichen, each one carved with symbols too worn to decipher. The air inside the circle shimmered, as if with heat, though the day was cold and damp. We stepped forward, the wind rising, the trees sighing all around us. And that was when the whispering began, soft, insistent, and everywhere at once, as if the forest itself were trying to speak. For a moment, none of us moved. The wind seemed to hold its breath, the only sound the distant drip of rainwater falling from the endless tangle of pine needles overhead. The circle of stones looked wrong, somehow, a mistake in the world, as if the earth itself was trying to hide it under moss and shadow. I forced myself forward, feeling the weight of every footstep. Owen's hand hovered near mine, his face pale, sweat beading at his temples despite the chill. Kayla hung back at the tree line, her arms folded tight across her chest. Jamie and Marcus stood together, neither looking at the stones, both pretending not to be afraid. As we drew closer, I could make out the carvings etched deep into each stone. Most were runes I didn't recognize, spirals, jagged lines, and a symbol that looked almost like an open eye, slit through the middle as if it had been scratched out. Beneath the lichen and the layers of years, something like rust stained the base of each stone. Owen knelt down and brushed away a layer of wet leaves. "See," he whispered. "They look old. Like ancient. This doesn't match any of the local tribe's symbols I've seen before." Kayla shook her head, glancing back into the woods. "I don't like this, so let's just get the photos and go. This place, it feels wrong." Jamie's phone buzzed, a jarring sound in the quiet. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "No service. Weird. I had 2 bars 10 minutes ago." Marcus snorted. "What? You afraid the trees are going to eat us? Come on, it's just rocks. Let's take the pictures and bail." But when he stepped into the circle, the ground seemed to shift beneath him. He stumbled, cursing, and we all froze as a sudden gust of wind howled through the clearing, whipping up the scent of wet earth and rot. The trees creaked, branches scraping together like bones. I lifted my phone and snapped a few photos, but the images came out blurry, streaked with static and strange patterns of light. Owen tried with his old Nikon, shaking his head as every shot came out overexposed, the stones wreathed in a halo of white glare. It was Kayla who first noticed the footprints. "Guys, look." We followed her gaze to a patch of mud just inside the circle. There were tracks, bare feet, small and narrow, but the toes were long, almost clawed. Whatever had made them had walked in a spiral, round and round the stones, until the trail disappeared beneath a pile of moss. Jamie's voice was barely more than a whisper. Do you think someone's living out here?" Owen shook his head, but his hands were trembling. "I don't know. I found these stones in the old photos, but the footprints weren't there. Something's changed." We lingered for a moment, each of us wrapped in our own dread, as the wind whistled and the forest seemed to close in. Then, as if cued by some unseen signal, the whispering began again, closer this time, like breath on the back of your neck. "Go," Kayla hissed. "Let's get out of here. Now." We backed away, never turning our backs on the circle. The farther we moved, the louder the whispers grew, nonsense syllables, or maybe words from some language too old for memory. My skin crawled with every step. As soon as we reached the edge of the clearing, the sound stopped. The woods were silent again, but the hush was different, denser, as if we'd disturbed something that didn't want to be seen. Marcus tried to laugh, but it came out choked. See? Easy. We're still alive. Let's go get lunch. We made our way back through the forest, moving faster than before, none of us willing to admit we were running from shadows. My mind raced with questions. Who, or what, had left those footprints? Why did the photos come out wrong? What did the roots remember mean? By the time we reached Owen's house, the sky was darkening and the rain had returned, pounding the roof like a warning. Owen locked the doors behind us, then drew the curtains tight. That night, as I lay awake, listening to the wind push against the windows, I tried to convince myself that it was just old stones and tricks of the light. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw those clawed footprints circling and heard the forest whispering secrets just out of reach. And somewhere, deep in the heart of Hollow Pines, something was listening. We tried to go back to normal that evening. Owen ordered greasy takeout burgers for everyone. Kayla turned on the old TV, flipping past static and infomercials until she found a sitcom none of us cared about. Jamie sat at the kitchen table, staring into her phone as if reception would miraculously return. Marcus hovered near the back door, chain-smoking despite the rain, saying little. The photographs we'd taken lay scattered across the kitchen table, most of them blurry or warped, the stones reduced to gray smears and flashes of white light. My own phone showed only 2 corrupted images, lines twisting into tangled spirals, almost like roots curling through static. We passed the photos around, each of us pretending not to be bothered by how wrong they looked. After a while, Kayla broke the silence. I've seen something like that before. At my grandma's, in Nebraska. She used to say that if a place didn't want to be photographed, it wouldn't let you. Like the spirits mess with the film. She laughed, but her eyes didn't join in. Owen pushed his chair back, restless. I know it's stupid, but did anyone else hear those voices? He looked around, sheepish, waiting for someone to mock him. But no one did. Instead, Jamie whispered, I keep hearing them now. In my head. Like they're stuck in there. A sudden gust rattled the windows. We all jumped. Marcus flicked his cigarette out into the rain, then turned. Look, it's just an old pagan ritual site or something. Some hiker with weird feet. Probably just some meth head, right? He didn't sound convinced. We fell into an uneasy silence, each person lost in their own thoughts. I felt the fatigue of travel and fear, but sleep wouldn't come easy. When I finally made my way to the spare bedroom, the wind outside seemed to have picked up, sighing through the eaves like 1,000 whispered voices. I dreamed I was walking alone through the forest. The pines grew taller with every step, trunks twisted and covered in oozing sap. Shadows slipped from tree to tree, always just out of sight. I came upon the stone circle again. Only now, the stones were taller than before, each one with a single, open eye carved at the top, all of them watching me. Something moved in the center, a shape, impossibly thin, almost human, crawling slowly around the stones, leaving clawed footprints in the black earth. I tried to run, but my feet were rooted to the ground. The wind in the trees rose to a howl, and suddenly I understood. The voices weren't whispering. They were chanting my name. I woke gasping, heart pounding. The bedroom was icy cold, the window fogged with condensation. For a long moment, I just listened, to the rain, to the house settling, to the silence. It felt as if something were pressing against the outside walls, waiting for me to drift off again. Down the hall, I heard a floorboard creak. I tensed, holding my breath. Another sound, soft footsteps, moving toward the kitchen. I slipped from the bed and eased the door open. Light spilled under the kitchen doorway. I crept closer, heart hammering, then peeked in. Jamie stood in front of the window, staring out into the darkness. Her hair was wild, eyes wide and unfocused. She didn't notice me at first. Her lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. Her fingers traced patterns in the condensation, spirals, lines, shapes I recognized from the stones. Jamie, I whispered. She turned slowly, almost dreamlike, eyes unfocused. I can't hear them, she murmured. They're closer now. They know our names. Before I could answer, Another shadow flickered at the edge of the glass outside. Just a trick of the wind, I told myself. Just branches in the storm. But even after Jamie shuffled back to her room, I stayed awake, watching the trees sway in the night. And as the hours crept by, a new dread began to settle in my chest. A certainty that we had brought something back with us, and that the real story of Hollow Pines was only just beginning. Morning arrived heavy and gray. The rain hadn't let up. It drummed on the roof like impatient fingers, steady and cold. The house was filled with the uneasy silence of people who hadn't really slept. We gathered around the kitchen table again, nursing mugs of bitter coffee, no one mentioning the dreams or the night's strange sounds. Jamie looked pale and drawn, rubbing at her temples. Marcus stared at his phone, thumb scrolling endlessly through a news feed that wouldn't load. Kayla chewed her nails, gaze distant. Only Owen tried to force a sense of normalcy, joking about the classic Oregon summer and the way the air always smelled like wet pine needles. But I saw the way his hands shook when he brought his mug to his lips. As we picked at breakfast, Jamie's voice broke the silence. I don't think we should have gone into the circle. No one argued. Instead, the memory of the stones seemed to drift across the table, cold and heavy. Kayla finally spoke, her voice thin. My grandma used to say that when you step into something old, something sacred, it leaves a mark on you, even if you don't see it right away. Marcus snorted, but there was little conviction in it. Yeah? Maybe it's just poison ivy. But even he glanced at his arm, as if expecting to find something crawling there. After breakfast, we tried to distract ourselves. Owen suggested we go into town, stock up on supplies, and get some fresh air. Kayla volunteered to drive. We split up. Marcus and I would check out the general store while Jamie and Owen grabbed coffee. Walking through the aisles, Marcus kept fidgeting, picking things up and putting them down again. You ever get the feeling, he said suddenly, that something's watching you? Not like a person, but, I dunno, like the air's thicker or something's breathing right behind you. He tried to laugh, but the sound was brittle. Man, I gotta quit smoking. We paid and headed outside. The sky was low, pressing on the treetops. I caught my reflection in a shop window, and for a second, I thought I saw something behind me. A tall, thin figure standing among the pines across the street, its limbs impossibly long, head bent at an unnatural angle. I spun around. Nothing there, only trees and rain. Back at Owen's, Kayla was in the bathroom, running the faucet so long the pipes groaned. When she came out, her face was white, her eyes rimmed red. You okay? I asked gently. She nodded, biting her lip. Just had a weird rash on my arms. Look, she rolled up her sleeves. Faint lines, like scratches or scrapes, ran from her wrists up to her elbow, winding and looping, spiraling patterns. They looked almost like the runes carved on the stones. Owen came up behind us, eyes widening as he saw her arms. I have those too, he said quietly. I thought it was just from the brambles yesterday. A tense silence settled over us. Jamie, sitting at the table, lifted her shirt sleeve. The same strange marks trailed along her shoulder. None of us wanted to admit it, but the truth was plain. We'd brought something back. That night, the wind howled louder. The old house creaked and settled, every shadow lengthening. I lay awake, heart pounding, tracing my own forearm with trembling fingers. There, in the pale light leaking through the curtains, I saw them. Fine, red marks spiraling just beneath the skin. A cold realization sank in. The marks weren't from the forest. They were from the stones. And every time I blinked, I swore I could hear the whispering, not outside, but inside my head, soft, insistent, promising that this was only the beginning. Far off, in the restless darkness beyond the glass, something watched and waited. Night pressed close around the house, so thick it felt almost physical, an ocean of dark pressing against the glass. Rain spattered the windows, wind moaning through the eaves, and the pines outside swayed like restless giants. Inside, the tension was palpable, a brittle silence broken only by the low hiss of the heater and the distant drip of a leaky faucet. We tried to act normal. Kayla baked cookies, the smell too sweet and cloying in the heavy air. Owen scrolled through old photos on his laptop, but his eyes barely moved. Marcus pretended to watch TV, but his gaze kept darting to the black windows. Jamie was the worst. She sat hunched at the kitchen table, tracing the spiral marks on her arm again and again, lips moving in silent, frantic prayer. As the hours dragged on, the lights flickered. Once, they went out completely, plunging us into a darkness so complete it felt like drowning. When the bulbs sputtered back to life, I noticed the rain had stopped. All that remained was the wind and the ever-present hush of the pines. We debated sleeping arrangements, half joking about ghost stories and taking turns watching the door. In the end, we each retreated to separate rooms, but no one slept easily. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, ears straining for sounds that didn't belong. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard creaked. The heater clicked off, and the air turned icy. That was when I heard it, a faint tapping at the window. At first, I told myself it was just a branch in the wind. But the tapping grew louder, more insistent, until it sounded like knuckles rapping against the glass. I sat up, heart hammering, staring into the darkness. The window faced the backyard, where the pines grew thickest. I crept closer, pressing my palm to the cold pane. Through the condensation, I saw a movement, a shadow slipping between the trees, impossibly tall and thin, arms bending at angles no human should possess. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace, stopping at the edge of the yard to look directly at the house. My breath froze. The figure's head cocked to one side, as if listening. Then, a low, guttural whisper vibrated through the glass. My name, spoken in a dozen voices at once. I stumbled back, tripping over the corner of the bed. The whispering filled my head, rising and falling, the cadence matching the marks spiraling up my arms. I clapped my hands over my ears, but the voices only grew louder. Suddenly, a scream tore through the silence, from Kayla's room. I rushed into the hallway, nearly colliding with Owen and Marcus. Jamie was already at Kayla's door, banging desperately. Kayla, open up." The door swung open, and we burst inside. Kayla sat on the floor, knees drawn to her chest, eyes wild and unfocused. Her arms were streaked with red, the spiral marks raw and angry. The air in the room was bitter with the smell of earth, wet, rotting, like the heart of the forest itself. "They were here," she sobbed. "They were at the window. The trees moved. I saw them watching me. She broke off, choking on her own words. Owen wrapped her in a blanket, voice shaking. "It's okay. You're safe. We're all here." But none of us believed it. Not really. In the dim light, the spiral marks on all our arms seemed to pulse, bright as fresh wounds. The wind outside picked up, howling through the trees, carrying with it the unmistakable sound of voices, chanting, pleading, warning. That night, none of us slept. We huddled together in the living room, blankets pulled tight, staring at the windows and the shifting shadows beyond. Every so often, someone would jerk awake, certain they'd heard their own name whispered from the darkness. As dawn bled through the pines, pale and cold, a single thought gripped me with icy certainty. Whatever we'd awakened in those woods was not finished with us yet, and the roots, once disturbed, would not let go so easily.